Ashley Marie Pond was born on March 1, 1989, in Oregon City, Oregon, and went by the nickname Ash. In 2002, 12-year-old Ashley was living with her mother, Lori Pond, in the Newell Creek Village apartments. She was described as a popular student at Gardner Middle School and loved being a member of the Fallen Angels dance team. Also on the team was Miranda Gaddis, a friend of Ashley's who lived in the same apartment complex. They were also friends with 12-year-old Mallory, who lived in a house next to the complex, and they would occasionally spend the night at her home. Unfortunately, that friendship with Mallory would lead to a horrible tragedy. One day in August of 2001, Ashley was visiting Mallory when her father, Ward Weaver III, sexually assaulted her. She reported the incident to the police, but they allegedly decided not to pursue charges. A few months later, on January 9, 2002, just after 8 a.m., as Ashley left her apartment, she took off running in an attempt to catch the school bus that she was late for. Sadly, she would never make it and was never seen again. When she failed to return home that evening, her mother reported her missing. A massive search got underway, and 13-year-old Miranda joined in. Sadly, all searches left investigators empty-handed. 2 months later, on March 8, 2002, Miranda left the apartment complex and headed for the bus stop, when, just like Ashley, she disappeared. When her mother, Michelle Duffy, arrived home later that day and realized her daughter never made it to school, she reported her missing. Now that 2 girls were missing, investigators began looking into the possibility that their abductor was someone they knew, especially since their disappearances were so similar. Months would go by with no lead in the case until August 13, 2002, when Francis Weaver's girlfriend was sexually assaulted by his father, Ward. Francis reported the assault to the police and told them that his girlfriend had run out of the house naked after his father forced himself on her and then tried to smother her to death. It turns out that Francis also had some other information that he'd been keeping and took this opportunity to inform the police that his father had shockingly confessed to murdering both Ashley and Miranda. He then allowed a camera crew from KATU onto his property, saying he had nothing to hide. He even walked over the concrete slab where Ashley was later found underneath. On August 24, 2002, FBI agents searched Ward's home and found Miranda's remains inside a box in a storage shed. The following day, they found the remains of Ashley in a barrel buried under a slab of concrete that Weaver had recently put down. When questioned about the concrete, he claimed that he was installing a hot tub. It turns out that he had lured Miranda into his home by telling her that Ashley was inside and ready to go home. Ward had a long history of violence and sexual assault against women and girls. On October 2, 2002, he was indicted and charged with the murder and sexual assault of both Ashley and Miranda. To avoid the death penalty, he pleaded guilty and received 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole. This story doesn't end there, because on February 14, 2014, Francis was arrested and charged with the murder of a drug dealer named Edward Spangler in Canby, Oregon. He wasn't the actual killer, but was still charged with murder for setting up the drug deal and making the plan to rob the guy. In the end, he was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. Ward Pete Weaver Jr., who is Ward's father and Francis's grandfather, is on California's death row for clubbing a stranded motorist to death in 1981 and sexually assaulting and strangling a man's fiancée to death. He then buried her body in his backyard. Ward's daughter Mallory was arrested for attacking a hospital security guard in 2010. It appears there is a lot of violence in this family, but thankfully, the worst offenders are now behind bars for good. Estella Mena was born on January 29, 1961, and went by Estella. She was described as a very driven, diligent, and fierce individual. In 1979, 18-year-old Estella was a high school senior living in Sunnyvale, California. At the time, she was working as a security guard at the Western Electric Offices Electrical Company when a horrible tragedy occurred. On October 27, 1979, a man entered the building lobby armed with a knife and began attacking and trying to assault Estella sexually. When another employee in the building stumbled on the scene, the attacker fled. Staff quickly called 911, and paramedics rushed her to the hospital, where she was sadly pronounced dead. With little to no leads, the case would unfortunately go unsolved for the next 44 years. They were eventually able to generate a male DNA profile from blood collected from the scene, but there were no matches in CODIS. In 2022, investigators enlisted the help of forensic genetic genealogy, and they were able to provide detectives with a couple of potential suspects, one of which was quickly eliminated. In 2023, the second DNA profile was created and entered into CODIS, and this time they got a match to a man named Samuel Silva. Silva was a violent sex offender who was 18 years old and living with his family when he murdered Estella. He had a long criminal history consisting of manslaughter, attempted murder, assault with a deadly weapon, sexual assault, and gun charges. It's believed he met Estella while they were both working at the Great American Theme Park in the Bay Area that opened 3 years before her murder. After killing her, he fled back to Colorado. Justice would never be served because he died in a Colorado prison in 2008. Josephina Catherine Cunningham was born on July 25, 2019, to parents Lakeisha Stewart and Joseph Cunningham, and went by Josie. She was described as a bright, kind, and bubbly child. In 2024, 3-year-old Josie and her mother were living in an apartment in Rensselaer, New York. Unfortunately, in late June of 2023, she began dating 34-year-old Robert Fisher, and 2 weeks later, she let him move in. About a week after that, on July 6, Lakeisha asked Robert to babysit Josie. When she returned in the middle of the night, she found Robert lying on the couch naked, deleting items from his phone. She covered him with a towel, checked on Josie, who was sound asleep, and went to bed. The following morning, when she entered Josie's room, she got the shock of her life. Josie was unresponsive, with foam coming out of her mouth, and she smelled of bleach. She quickly called 911, and poor little Josie was rushed to the hospital where she was pronounced dead. When officers searched the home, they found blood on Josie's bed, indicating to them that a violent struggle had taken place. Investigators then questioned Robert, who denied having anything to do with her death. An autopsy determined that she had been drugged, sexually assaulted, and strangled to death. From there, investigators were able to link Robert's DNA to the biological DNA found on Josie, which explains why she smelled like bleach, because he was trying to destroy his DNA. He was then arrested and charged with her murder, and in an unexpected turn, he confessed and pleaded guilty. He said he gave her clozapine and Xanax. He then sexually assaulted her before strangling her to death. He then scrubbed her down with Clorox bleach so hard that he rubbed the pigment off her face. In the end, he was sentenced to 20 years to life, but he would serve less than a month of it because another inmate killed him on October 22, 2024. He wasn't the only casualty that day. 51-year-old William Brand, who was also there for sex offenses against a minor, was killed as well. Josie's family was hoping for the death penalty, but it was abolished in the state of New York in 2004. Now, her big brother, Jaquan Stewart, advocates for the return of capital punishment in the state. Caitlin Maria Collman was born on August 13, 1994, to parents Jonathan and Angie Neese, and went by Katie. In 2005, 10-year-old Katie was a 4th grader living in Crothersville, Indiana, when a horrible tragedy occurred. After school on January 25, 2005, Katie went to run an errand and was never seen again. When she failed to return home that night, her parents reported her missing. 2 days later, when there was still no sign of her, an Amber Alert was issued. Sadly, on January 30, 2005, a state trooper found Katie's body in a stream near Cypress Lake, about 15 miles from her home. Her killers sexually assaulted her, tied her hands behind her back, and then threw her into the stream where she drowned. Folks in Crothersville were very taken aback because it was the first time in 25 years that a murder occurred. An initial suspect was 39-year-old Anthony Stockelman. A witness reported that they saw Katie in his white Ford F-150 pickup truck the night she disappeared. However, he passed a polygraph and was let go. A neighbor of Katie's named Charles James Hickman, who went by Chucky, was also interviewed by police and shockingly confessed to the murder. He told investigators that Katie was abducted because some tweakers thought she saw them making meth as she walked to the store to buy toilet paper. He was arrested and charged with her murder, but his confession turned out to be false, and he was later released. 3 months after Katie's murder, investigators were shocked when the DNA matched to Stockelman. Investigators were also able to match the red carpet fibers found on Katie's clothes to the carpet found in his mother's home. It turns out that he was helping his mother move on the day Katie was reported missing. His wife, Tabitha, told police that her husband also sat in his recliner and ate dinner, but on the night of Katie's disappearance, he said, and I quote, "Let's sit around the table and eat like a family while we still can." Stockelman eventually confessed to sexually assaulting and killing Katie and agreed to plead guilty as long as the death penalty was off the table. He was then sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In 2006, he was sent to the Wabash Valley Correctional Facility in Carlisle, Indiana, where Katie's cousin, Jared Harris, just happened to also be incarcerated for a burglary conviction. 3 days later, on September 22, 2006, Jared slipped into Stockelman's cell with one other inmate and waited for him to return. When he did, Jared and the other inmate held him down and tattooed Katie's revenge across his forehead using a makeshift tattoo gun. In 1994, 27-year-old Melonie White was the mother of a son and had recently moved from Phoenix, Arizona to the Las Vegas Valley with her boyfriend. On August 26, 1994, Melonie was in downtown Vegas near Fremont Street with friends when she suddenly disappeared. The following day, 2 men hiking on Lake Mead Boulevard found her body in the Gypsum Wash area. She had been beaten, strangled to death, and then dragged from a car. Unfortunately, investigators were unable to identify a suspect, and the case went unsolved for the next 30 years. In 2010, they were able to identify unknown male DNA. It was uploaded to CODIS, but no matches were found. They tried again in 2021, but still nothing. Then a group of volunteers called the Las Vegas Justice League stepped in and paid for the DNA samples to be re-evaluated by Othram. Their genetic genealogy research was able to provide investigators with a potential suspect, a man by the name of Arthur Lavery. Lavery was 38 at the time of the murder, grew up in Vegas, and lived not far from where Melonie's body was found. Besides a battery charge, he had no criminal record. He would also never face justice because he died from heart disease and complications from COVID in 2021.